Able to see that, and off we go. So, with Martin and Sam, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself and explain your relationship to books, reading, and empathy?
Yes, thank you, Megan. Yeah, I'm Sarah Mears. I'm actually a librarian by trade. I work for an organisation called Libraries Connected, but I'm also one of the founders and directors of Empathy Lab, which is a charitable social enterprise, which is founded on the principle that reading builds empathy. So we work through an affiliate schools program, and we run an annual Read for Empathy collection, which we launched last week, which we'll talk about in a minute. We run an annual Empathy Day, which is on the 6th of June, and we also work with publishers, authors, and illustrators, really wanting to drive that empathy educated generation.
Fantastic. So, without more of ado, what I thought I'd do to start with is just give us a little bit of an introduction and to think around what empathy actually is. And anybody who knows me and has worked with me before, or has even been on one of these webinars before, is that I'm extraordinarily interested in the research, particularly psychological, but educational, sociological, and economic research around the development of reading, particularly for young children. And I'm very lucky to be studying for a doctoral qualification at the moment, and my supervisor is Professor Jane Oakhill from the University of Sussex. One of Jane's particular interests for us, which is handy for us, is reading and the development of empathy. And she's currently the principal investigator in a study called Reading Feelings. So I asked Jane what it is that she thinks that we should be exploring, what we should be doing in schools, and why empathy is so important for us, and so important for us as teachers to begin to consider. More than anything, I asked her first of all to define what empathy is. And she put it very succinctly for us, I think, in the terms of she would describe empathy as the ability to share and to understand and experience concern for other people's emotional experiences and other people's states of emotional being. And as such, it provides a foundation, the underpinnings for what psychologists call pro-social behavior. That's a nice way of describing being nice to each other and engaging in behaviors that act in a way to enable us to be friendly and have a community sense of spirit at heart. And so, from that perspective, the development of empathy is incredibly important for this relationship of social justice, of understanding the position, the feelings, the experiences of others, and recognizing them as valuable and important. What's really interesting to think about from our perspective as well, particularly if we've got any early years teachers in sharing this meeting with us, is that empathy appears to be a learnt behaviour. It's something we can practice and develop and get better and better and better at, particularly as we move through the primary school. And we know from the research, if we think about that now, that reading fiction, particular types of fiction, has been shown to influence the development of empathy. We've got recent studies, most of which are sat around, have participants who are adults who are avid readers of fiction, tend to perform better on tests of empathy that we use, perhaps empathy scales or whatever. But this has not ever really been investigated in children. The link between reading fiction and developing empathy in children is just not established. But that's what Jane's study is exploring. So, just finally, before we move on to some other aspects about empathy, I just want to explore the complexity as it is. We all know that developing reading is incredibly complicated, and empathy again is incredibly complicated. And from the perspective of psychologists, we might consider that there are three aspects to it. The first aspect we might call emotional or affective empathy, and this is where a person can resonate and understand somebody else's feelings, can notice them, can think about them, can and feel and recognize them. The second aspect of empathy is a bit more of a cognitive idea. So it's about perspective taking. And this is where you can apply reasoning as a person to work out how somebody else feels. So, not necessarily to recognize or resonate or have the same emotions or feelings, but to really get under the skin of understanding through a reasoned way why they feel like they do. And then the first one is known sometimes as intention to comfort or pro-social empathy. And this is that literally that idea where we feel that we empathize with the person there and have a sense that we want to help or comfort them, to ensure that we have a community and a collective understanding and a mutual sort of happiness in those ways. Intention, motivation is really, really important with all of this. But equally so is this idea of what psychologists call transportability. So in text, that aspect when you get into a book, a bit of fiction, and you are transported to another world, you disappear and are thoroughly engaged with it. That is the aspect where we have the greatest tendency to be able to experience the emotions and perceptions of others. That transportability in a text is what it's suggested helps us unpick and understand. Sarah, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about this and where Empathy Lab takes it and how the sort of positions that you take from this respect.
Oh, yeah, yeah. What I'll do is, if it's okay, I'll share my screen and just show you some of our latest Read for Empathy collection. And as I go, I'll talk about why they're important, if that's okay with you.
Sounds
I'll do
fantastic.
that now. And fingers crossed, I can share the screen. It's always a nervous bit, but hopefully that you can see that okay. So, yeah.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
could.
great. Okay, so yeah, so as I mentioned before, we are Empathy Lab and really excited to be here because we wanted to share our Read for Empathy collection 2024, which is our latest book collection, which was launched just last week. It's part of, as I mentioned, 4 key interventions that we do during the year. Our 12-month affiliate schools program, the Read for Empathy collection, Empathy Day on the 6th of June, which is kind of brings everything together, and our work with publishers, authors and illustrators. And why we do it, I think that Martin wants to talk about Keith Oatley's book, and he was one of our sort of founding fathers, if you like, when we were starting to look at what Empathy Lab should be about, because he's done this work, particularly with adults, around reading fiction and that ability to empathise with other people. And if you are interested in that, if you know Michael Mosley's work, his podcast, there's a one on reading where Raymond Marr, who's one of Keith Oatley's colleagues, talks about that and the work they've done. But really, I wanted to talk to you about our Read for Empathy collection today. There are 2 collections that are launched each year. They're books submitted by publishers and then are assessed by a team of 14 judges, so teachers, head teachers, librarians, children's book experts. We get together, we argue about the books and come up with our Read for Empathy collections. We have a series of empathy criteria that we're looking at when we're choosing our collections, and they're about the quality of the writing, the quality of the depiction of character, so that thing that Megan was talking about, the ability to transport yourself into the text, really comes through. We're looking at those kind of challenging life experiences, and we're looking at things like the authenticity of the writing. We want children to be reading books that really feel that they've been written from a point of view of real lived experience. So in our primary collection, there are 40 titles, and they range from picture books through to longer novels with poetry, a few graphic novels in there as well, and early readers, a wide range of titles. And then in the secondary collection, we have 25 books in the secondary collection. Again, poetry, graphic novels, longer novels as well. We also love to push picture books into the secondary collection where we can, because we think that picture books are really powerful all the way through. If you go onto our website, there are guides to download to both collections, and you'll get previous collections on there as well. This is our 8th collection. So yeah, do download the guides. The blurbs in the guides are written from an empathy perspective. So we've really thought about why have they been chosen from an empathy perspective using our empathy criteria. And I just thought I'd just show you some of the books in the collection and why we chose them. So we have within the collection, within the primary collection, an emotion collection, just 7 books in the collection that we really think help children build the language for emotions, because we know that that's one of the 4 key empathy skills, is building a language for emotions so children can understand their own feelings and those of other people. we also choose books where they really tackle the world's issues, but not in a kind of didactic way. They're brilliant books, but they really help children think through some of those issues that are so powerful. Finding Bear, I don't know if you knew The Last Bear, Hannah Gold's wonderful book. This is the sequel to Finding Bear, that wonderful relationship of a girl and a polar bear. And Safia's War I wanted to mention as well, because that's a book based on a true story of families, Muslim families who protected Jewish families in a mosque in Paris during the Second World War. So really looking at the range of issues. And then books that celebrate diversity and identity. So looking at what it's like to be gay or to be non-binary, to look at neurodivergence and so on. So it's about those experiences helping other children understand them. And I just wanted to highlight I Am Nefertiti, which is one of my favorite books on the collection this year, which is all about what happens when a music teacher shortens Nefertiti's name and how it diminishes her as a person. It's the power of a name and identity. And then you've talked as well, Megan, about social action, pro-social behaviours. There's lots of books that are about characters taking action to make their communities better. Brilliant role models, helping children understand that everyone can make a difference. So just a bit of an unscrupulous advert. So we are actually doing some training on using the Read for Empathy collection if anyone's interested in that next week. So do have a look at that on our website. And please do register for Empathy Day, where we'll be talking loads about the books that really build empathy with lots of the authors and illustrators that are on the collection this year. And that's on the 6th of June. Register now and there's a toolkit for you. And these are our contact details if you want to talk to us anymore. We'd love to talk more about this. This is obviously a subject we're all really passionate about, reading for empathy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. We will put all of those materials on the English Association website as well, so everybody can have a look at them and follow that link. And there's lots of lovely comments in the chat about how everybody loves them, and the range of books and collections is really powerful. I did notice one in your primary collection that I'm hearing of a lot about at the moment as I go around and work with teachers in schools across the Northwest. The Final Year by Matt Goodfellow has totally resonated with the children in our area. They have found it absolutely incredible, to the point where teachers are telling me that they can't put the book down, that the children are telling them that they've got to keep reading it. Yeah, just a wonderful example of how it's captured their imaginations and probably transported them.
Absolutely. I think that is the most amazing book. It's in verse as well, so it's a really easy read, and but it draws on so many issues and angles in such a clever way. It's a brilliant book by a brilliant writer. Yeah, I absolutely wholeheartedly second that.
I mean, and I think lots of what I'm hearing from teachers is that the children value the perspective and can hear their voices in it, which again helps with that kind of connection and the empathetic response. That's me in that text, and it's explaining my world and how I feel, and others can read and understand that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Martin, I know you've been doing a lot of work from the National Literacy Trust perspective on these sorts of things, and this has been an interest for you for a really long time. Could you kind of share from your perspective, what does it mean, developing empathy, things that you've done that work brilliantly, some texts and books that you could share as well?
I mean, I'll go quickly because I don't want to hog the time, but I just want to say the Final Year translates regionally. It's massive down here, and I have to say, every time I have conversations, whether it's with teachers, children, authors, publishers, it's just one of those books where I've actually had a couple of people say, "Oh, I've avoided it because of the hype." It's not hype. It's such a brilliant book. And it reminds me of one of the books that I didn't choose to share today, but The Boy in the Tower, because I wrote some plans for that from Hearts for Learning. And so it was used in a good number of schools, and time again, the response from children, it was written for year 5. And I mean, I just remember one school having Polly Ho Yen, who's featured as an author on the Empathy Lab's brilliant list. Year in, year out, they curate such a brilliant list. And it was wonderful. They had her in because of the strength of the response across the whole cohort. So they actually used Pupil Premium funding to buy her next book for the children. She came in, did a Q&A at signing. And the questions the children were asking, it wasn't, sometimes Q&A sessions can be a little bit ropey, not even just with children, but with adults. They were saying profound things. They were challenging her about her ending. And it was just clear that they'd been immersed. And I think it goes back to Sarah's point around authenticity. That's writ large in the final year, that what you were just saying there about children seeing themselves. And it was the same with The Boy in the Tower. And having read the book with children, you can almost feel this journey from sympathy or concern to this ache for the central character, Addy, who just has the weight of the world literally on his shoulders. And it's just an astonishingly good book. So I could have chosen that. With your permission, I'm just going to quickly share slides because I have to apologize. I'm in house moving hell. I mean, I've been stuck in a chain for about 9 months now, and all my library books are packed up and it's absolutely killing me. So I've had to put my books on slides. Otherwise, I would be waggling them at you at home. So I'll just check that that's come through. I think it looks like it has. Are you getting the
Yeah,
slides?
absolutely.
Yep, lovely stuff. So if I just click out there, so that comes off. This title was actually in Empathy Lab's collection last year. It wasn't by design. It's just because this is a book about, it's a very meaningful book for me because, you know, someone that lives just outside of London and spends a lot of time going into London on the tube, and the sort of protocols around do not make eye contact, you know, just shuffle along and you stick to your own little world and your own little business. What I love about this book by Kim Houghton is the way it gets under the skin of all these different characters that you can see there on this subway. So what you'll get is you'll get a view of the bustle and hustle and the people dashing and the people minding their business on the subway. And then you'll turn the page and it goes underneath the surface. And there's always a little link to how they've presented on the train or as they move about the station. But then there'll be something of perhaps their personal history of their home life. So if I go to the next slide, you'll see here, I mean, classic, the stressed businessman dashing for the train. And just, I'll just for a second, let you just take in that first paragraph on the top left-hand side to see what parallels are drawn. Sorry, you need to go into the second paragraph, actually, I hasten to add. So you have the parallel drawn with childhood and taking part in relay races and being fast, and then the link to actually wanting to get home to his daughter. And it's just, it humanizes, which is something that's really, really important in what we're talking about. And I think it humanizes in an environment where actually there's a concerted effort sometimes not to humanize, you know, to be as neutral and non-connected as possible. So I really can't recommend this book enough. And you could do wonderful work, you know, having the children think about inventing characters of their own, actually, so generating ideas about how someone might present in the world and what's going on underneath the surface. Lots of talk, lots of role play. And on a similar notion, this is an old classic, 2009, Shaun Tan, who is, if it's fair to say, godlike in the world of picture books. And I don't know if this book gets as much attention as I would like it to. I think it's an overlooked gem in too many cases. It doesn't get anything like the attention of The Arrival, say.
I was
And
talking about it yesterday, though, to a group of teachers and telling them
fabulous.
to use it. Yes.
So this book, I wrote plans around this and had so much fun. I have to be honest, it wasn't for everyone. Some teachers, I think, found it just way too quirky what I was asking them to do with this. And I was really pleased because there's so many good stories in this. So instead of having a linear plan, I plotted kind of almost like modular approach. So you could choose, I'm going to do that story, this vignette, that little excerpt. And basically it was all about generating monologue. So it was about totally working in small groups, in pairs, to take on a character. And it had that thing that, you know, picture books often do really well, whereby there's a safety and a kind of distance in that. This is a surreal book. It's based in suburbia, but for example, the opening story is about a water buffalo that gives directions. If you have a problem, you go to the water buffalo and it will point you in a direction. And if you keep going in that direction, you will find the solution to your problem. Well, what's it like to feel like this underappreciated water buffalo because he's not properly appreciated? So there's exploring that. There's a really strange little, almost like mini graphic novel around stick men and women being treated really badly in their local town. And so what would it be like to be a stick man? And you can really explore prejudice and, excuse me, cruel behaviors in a very safe way. Oh, of course. Sorry, I might have to take a sip of water. But as I say on the screen there, it allows you to get really deep into the character and then experiment with voice, and you're getting win-win there. You're working with expression, which of course has benefits to reading performance in many ways. It's that expressiveness and how it supports fluency, experimentation, that there's no one way to interpret a text once you've written it, and really seeing what it takes to get under the skin of a character. So I've just showed that picture there just to underscore the surreal wonder of this. If you go to Sean Tan's website, it really generously has shared interviews, lots of insights around the books, materials that you can use, so long as it's for educational purposes, not for commercial purposes. I mean, this is one of my favorite, this story here. I've used it time and time again, where two boys argue about how one map ends in an atlas and there's no continuation point, but surely it can't be the edge of the world. Well, as it turns out, it kind of is. So exploring how those brothers interrelate, because there's again real authenticity there, role playing that, and then bring that to bear in individual monologues and looking for the contrast between the two. Absolutely fabulous, I feel. I think I've witted on enough there, so I'll stop sharing.
I was just going to say, Martin, sorry to interrupt you. The characterization that you're talking about, we've explored a lot of that with the book The Lion Above the Door.
Yeah.
With the two characters, one who's Chinese and one who's from more of an Indian background, and what it's like to be those characters in a far different area, I suppose, for two people to simply stand out in a certain situation.
Excellent. It's a great book. So, you know, another top choice. This is definitely a really great selection that we're getting through here today.
Sam, would you like to share some of your other kind of choices that you've brought to the table?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, you've got very particular experience in using them directly with your children in your context and in your classrooms. Go for it.
Yes, so I obviously look at these from a very different aspect, in that I want to explore these books and then explore them further with the children. It's really from a personal perspective, just some of the discussion, some of the chat, some of the experiences that it brings some of the children out into sharing, some information that you would never have known about them, simply because they can empathize or see themselves with a character within a book, is something that's really important within the classroom. Going back to The Lion Above the Door, we explored a lot of characterization. A lot of the children that we have in our area are refugees, or they are children who have traveled into this country as a result of something going on in their own country. So exploring texts like that, where with the movement of people, is really relatable for our children. Certainly in Key Stage 1, we've looked at a book called Baru, which is about these polar bears who get swept away on their little iceberg, gets broken up, and they keep ending up going from one place to another one, until they finally find somewhere that they fit in. And a lot of our younger children, that's very representative of what they've been through in their lives. Certainly go on, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's supported them recognise the validity of their own feelings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one that I wanted to really talk about was Wonder, which I know is a slightly older book, but it's about a young boy who's got his disfigured face, for want of a better word, and he can't go to a mainstream school as a result of these things. It gets into a school where after 5 years of being homeschooled, he gets into another school in the 5th grade, and people make snidey remarks about him and comments behind his back without him knowing about it. And we constantly look at how it might feel to be this character. How does it feel to be different? Exploring how every person in the room is different. Okay, this might not be us in this particular situation, but how are you different to the person next to you? How are they different to the person opposite them? So it's really lovely. And when we plan units of writing around that, you can really see children starting to utilize their own experience and use their own feelings to start to understand the feelings of others.
Very much so. That's very much reminds me of the conversation that I was having yesterday about with a group of Year 6 teachers, actually, about this real importance of allowing children to explore their own feelings and their own reactions through writing, but also very much having that opportunity to empathize and to get into the characters, but see connections between themselves and the characters, and then allowing them to develop that in writing. We don't always need to ask children to step into the feet of other people when they're writing. They don't need to write in that character. I think that's sometimes really challenging for them, but they can take and put themselves in a similar situation perhaps, and explore around how they might react or how they might respond, particularly if we're focusing on, like Sarah said, the identification of the emotions, really naming those emotions and describing physiologically, so physically and emotionally, how they make us feel and how they might make us react or respond in those situations.
I think that's where our children and the type of children that we're getting through our school in particular is really helpful, because a lot of them have lived those things. They felt those things, so they're really good at starting to empathize with what it would be like to be those other people. And I think it is really important. They don't have to put themselves into that person's feet,
No, they have
but
their
just
own.
link it to what they've experienced. Or
Yeah, it makes me think of a book we use for a whole school project. So literally nursery right through to year 6, and it's often a challenge to find the right book. But we used The Suitcase, Chris Naylor Ballesteros book, and it was so interesting because that again deals with displacement being in a very safe way, and it's got a deliberately ambiguous central character. So three recognizable animals, and then one that's a bit of mystery, and that's deliberate so that it's not limiting who can identify with that character, even though it's essentially it looks a bit like an animated gherkin. So it's a strange thing to relate to, but still it means that it doesn't matter about gender. You're able to come to this. And when we worked with it in the class, in the year 2 class, there was a child that was talking about recent experience, where family had been displaced by an earthquake and had to come over here, and then others were drawing parallels with moving. And when I talk about empathy, I often go back to that wonderful Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talk, where she talks about finding the connection, the things that we share in terms of humanity is really important, because if a book is simply about eliciting sympathy, what it actually does is it highlights the difference rather than encourages that finding of what's the common humanity in this. And it's a wonderful thing that books can do. And again, echoing Sarah earlier and what we've just heard with Baru, it's that power of picture books as well. I think it really allows people to come to the same text from so many different positions, but find things that draw them together.
And we were talking just before that we admitted everyone about the kind of safety of the book, and we've used Margot Sunderland's work a lot, because she talks a lot about keeping things within the text. So actually, when there are really difficult emotions that it's quite hard particularly for a very young child to explore, or could be really triggering, having that safety of being able to read a story and make those connections for yourself when you're ready to make them is really powerful, and it allows you to explore some quite complex and difficult feelings, but quite safely, because it's all within the character and the story. You don't have to kind of expose yourself until you're ready to do so. And I think that's the power and the wonder of books. And I saw that Stella just put in the thing about books being both windows and mirrors, and I love that metaphor, because they are, aren't they? It's that thing about it's so important that you see yourself reflected in a book, but it's also really important that you see the wider world reflected in the book as well. And I think, Megan, I remember you talking at a libraries event during the lockdown about how important books were in terms of allowing children to see that wider world when their worlds were so shrunk. That's what books do all the time, isn't it? Like open windows, and they also allow you to see yourself. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. You've put in there. Yeah, I was going to just mention that reading Dr. Rudin Sims Bishop, that amazing piece that she's got, that we might put a link to on the EA website as well, about books being windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And there's a wonderful clip of her talking about this analogy and how important it is. Yes, Sarah, I remember that in lockdown. As a head, I was very, very conscious that we shot the shutters and we'd spend all our time trying to bring the world into school, but with lockdown we couldn't do that, and so books just became an absolutely central part of allowing these experiences and offering children a safe place in which to explore some of the emotions and that they were feeling too in that really, really difficult time. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing that oh, thank you, Martin. He's just put the TED Talk in the chat for you as
Oh,
well.
I should, because I was a bit vague on it, but the
Yeah.
dangerous thing of the story is it's such an entertaining talk. If you haven't seen it, it's
Fantastic.
yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to pick up on, this is almost in my selection of books that I have that I use in this context, is something that I'm very interested in at the moment and draws on lots of these themes, particularly that work that you were mentioning there, Sarah, is this idea of using books specifically to tackle challenges and issues that might be out of the experience or wealth of zone of experience for most of the children in the class, but is very much happening for one. And for me, grief is an area that this can be extremely powerful and very important. One of the books that I've chosen that I really enjoy using with children is this one. I don't know if you can see it in front of you. It's called Rabbitiness. And it's by Jo Empson. And in this lovely, lovely, lovely story with beautiful illustrations, it talks about some rabbit and how rabbit liked to do jumping and how rabbit liked doing rabbity things and hopping, but also rabbit liked to do other unrabbity things like painting. Rabbit liked painting, and I like painting too. So I'm empathizing with painting, but then all of a sudden Rabbit was gone. And he wasn't there anymore, and nobody knew where Rabbit was. And then this book starts to think about those feelings and describe all the feelings that Rabbit's friends had and the way they behaved, because no one knew what had happened to Rabbit. So that bringing it in a, like you say, Sarah, a very safe space in which to talk around grief and loss, that's resonates with everybody and with every child in some way, shape or form, and start to give us an opportunity to empathize, to relate, to cognitively be able to explore and reason behind somebody else's behavior. So all of these things in a beautiful book, beautifully illustrated, that allows you perhaps to transport yourself into that world as well. I find it absolutely glorious. The other one, and this is, Martin, you'll have to forgive me for sharing this, but I think this is another way of desperately understanding perhaps and being able to begin to empathize with the world from different perspectives, is I don't know if you can see this. You know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My
One of
best
your
friend.
favourites. Yeah, that's right. The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, by Kate DiCamillo. I love this because of the breadth of characters and the breadth of situations that the characters go through. And I have been in situations where I've suggested that we use this with teachers in school. Oh, no, we can't talk about that because it talks about alcoholism. Or no, we can't talk about that because it talks about poverty. And for me, that's the reason that you would do it, again, in the safe space, to use something where there's such beautiful writing and very evocative, but very sensitive and very well controlled opportunities to get inside those characters. Not least, it's just like a really super story as well, kind of a journey moving forward as we go. Wow. I think as we're kind of moving towards our final end, I'm going to challenge my three people, my three wonderful participants in this webinar, to tell me their favourite. If they could only take one, I'm doing a bit of a desert island discs here. You might have noticed my references. If you could only take one book, and Sarah, this is going to be really hard for you. You've got hundreds. If you could only take one, if you could only have one, if you could only have one in your bag and take it with you from school to school to school, what would it be? Ooh, what's your top choice that should be in every school library, do you think?
Oh, it's gonna be a hard one.
If we're ready, do we just go, or are we
Yeah,
going?
go for it, Martin. Go.
I'm going to challenge you back. I refuse to do one because it's too evil.
Oh.
I'm going to do two, and
Okay.
one's going to be a bit of a cheat. One is building on Edward Tulane. Raimi Nightingale was one of the most profound. I don't think it's a read aloud necessarily, but I think it's a read to yourself book. It's a book that's really goes deep into the skin of three particular children, and it's just an extraordinary book. It's one of the few books I've said is perfect. And the other is the collected works of Sydney Smith. So Town is by the Sea, Small in the City, which will work across a whole year
It
group.
works.
Well, it's just with his wonderful picture books, it's hard to pick one. If I had to, it'd be Towns by the Sea, but I think Small in the City scans better across phases.
Brilliant.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Oh, that was amazing. Sam?
I was going to say, well, I'm going to put my teacher hat on
Yeah, go for it.
and go with what's hooked my year sixes for the most, and that would be The Lion Above the Door, albeit a text that I have talked about already. That's the one that's really hooked them in the most. So I would have to say that. However, I do think it's really mean of you to say pick one.
Okay, all right.
It's
Point
grateful.
taken. Okay. Sarah, have you got one or possibly two, or
I
like
have got two. I have got, thank you for letting me have two. I have got two. One is going to be another shameless plug, I'm afraid, but my first one is probably one of the first books that we read when we were starting our empathy journey, and it's Perfectly Norman by Tom Percival, which is a picture book, and I just feel it shows the kind of the power of being different and the pain of being different so beautifully. And I just love Tom Percival on all of his books, like, you know, all of them I won't even mention, because the second one is this one, which is a book that was written by Rashmi Sardeshpande, and it's called We've Got This. And it's a book that I have to say that MC Lab had a hand in helping give Rashmi some of the ideas for, although she wrote it at breakneck speed. It's published by Quarto, Words and Pictures, and it's a kind of handbook on empathy, but with a big focus on using stories for empathy. So aimed at children and families. So yeah, do have a look out for that if you haven't seen it already. It's called We've Got This.
we've got
Sorry to interrupt. We're looking at using that in the next term.
Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic.
brilliant. That's an amazing recommendation.
There you go.
Yeah, fantastic. I have got something. I'm going to go a bit left field now, because I think maybe perhaps there's something we haven't touched on maybe as much as we should have done in terms of empathy and in terms of understanding other people's responses and their viewpoints on the world, and that's poetry, because poetry is absolutely that kind of essential sort of way of doing that. And you know, a lot of poetry is just, that's what it does, and that's what it's designed to do. So my book that I would probably have in my pocket or in my bag that I've used a lot with children of multiple different ages is this it's called The New and Collected Poems for Children by Carol Ann Duffy. Now it's not a very snappy title, I will agree, but Carol Ann Duffy being, you know, poet laureate and all of those things. And I'm just going to, if you'll forgive me, share a poem that's one of my favorites that I love to use with children, because I think it's one of those, it talks about one of those emotions that's not quite often talked about, maybe a little bit like envy, when you desperately want something that someone else has got. It's called Toy Dog. When I come home from school, he doesn't bark. He doesn't fetch the stick I throw for him in Clissold Park, or bite a burglar's ankle in the dark. Toy Dog. When I wake up, he doesn't lick my face. He never beats me by the mile the times we have a race, or digs up a bone from his secret place. Toy Dog. When I say heel or sit, he can't obey. I buy a red collar for him, though he will not stay, or trip me up at a soccer match when I play. Toy Dog. One day his brown glass eyes will soften, see. One night his nylon tail will wag when I come in for tea. His clock leg cock against a lamppost for a pee. Good dog. I think that sort of thing, just that engagement, that understanding which lovely language is so evocative and so accessible for children, and really can spark a conversation just by a 4 stanza poem, immediately and very swiftly and quickly explained and explored. So maybe that sparks me into perhaps our next webinar, in which we might talk about selected poetry for children and how we can use poetry in lots of really effective ways. And what I need to do now, as we come to the end of our time, is say thank you very, very much for my guests for bringing their thoughts and ideas and reflections. So thank you, Sam. Amazing. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about all of these things. In fact, I only wish we had more time and more books to share. To everybody else who's joined us on this webinar, you will be able to download and watch the webinar perhaps with colleagues and within school from the English Association. It'll be there by the end of this week, I suspect. And also we will post on with the webinar link lots of the things that we've talked about, links to the Empathy Lab, links to things that Martin has suggested, Rudin Sims Bishop's video, the other TED talk by
Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
That's right. Thank you very much. I'm just looking in the chat, and anything else that we have in that suggestion. Our next webinar together will be in May, when we'll be looking at the new award picture book 3 to 13, 3 to 11 awards, and exploring those texts and thinking about how they can be used in the classroom. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure, and have a really, really enjoyable Thursday afternoon.
Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.